Of this program contain graphic material. Viewer discretion is advised.
Parece la serie televisiva, pero este es el mundo real de CSI. No hay guiones, ni actores, y los casos no se resuelven en una hora.
It probably is like comparing Star Wars to the Space Shuttle program.
¿Quieren ver cómo es? Sujétense.
Apparently he took a high-powered rifle and shot himself. 3 suspects come in that were wearing masks. A male has been shot. This could very easily turn into a homicide.
La escena del crimen es solo el inicio.
It's extremely important for a homicide detective to witness an autopsy.
And that's an examination of every organ.
A veces es necesario un desagradable viaje a la morgue para descubrir la causa de la muerte.
When you go behind that fence, you really think that you're either in a very scary, bad movie or that you have happened upon a battlefield, because you'll see pieces and parts and bodies all over the place.
CSI hizo que la ciencia forense luciera atractiva.
Even if I'm doing a very simple routine crime, they want to know if I'm going to look for DNA.
I've seen it on TV. Why aren't you doing it here?
We'll say you don't want us to use this nifty neato tool because it'll totally destroy your house.
Y True Hollywood Story investigates the real-life CSI.
We're really just normal people who have kind of an extraordinary job.
So you ready?
El verdadero CSI. Desde Las Vegas, la anfitriona de nuestro programa, Samantha Harris.
We're here in Las Vegas, the fictional home of CSI, the show that launched television's hottest franchise. But how's this for a plot? 570 miles away in Sacramento, a deputy with the CSI unit arrives at a burglary scene in his patrol car. He leaves without a single fingerprint.
We still have nothing of value.
So where's the Hummer, the glamorous partner, the smoking gun? Well, the truth is, what happens on TV is nothing like the real thing. In the next hour, we're going to separate fact from fiction.
I've watched altogether maybe about a half hour, 45 minutes, and that's all that I can handle. I'm bothered by what I see on the show. They don't follow any rules of protocol and evidence collection.
We'll also look at what's called the CSI effect and how it's changing the way crimes are being investigated and prosecuted in cities large and small.
Jury, which is made up from the general public, expects a lot more, a lot quicker than what is reality. The program processes all the evidence and gets it all packaged up nice and neat in a 1-hour episode, and I understand that. I mean, it's an entertainment.
¿Cómo llegó CSI a la televisión? Esa historia es intrigante. En el 97, Anthony Syker, a sus 30 años, operaba un tranvía en Las Vegas. Una noche se le ocurrió escribir un guión para una serie sobre un apostador compulsivo.
Driving a green trolley back and forth for $8 an hour. And I would speak with all kinds of people that would stay at the hotel and learn all kinds of different perspectives. And I knew the town since I was born there, so I had a chance to write a movie called The Runner, and it got me into the business.
El film de bajo presupuesto llamó la atención del productor Jerry Bruckheimer, quien se hizo famoso con films como Top Gun y Bad Boys, y buscaba expandir su segmento televisivo.
Mr. Bruckheimer saw that movie and said, hey, can you write for television? And my wife was watching New Detectives one day, and that's how the whole thing started. And I said, I want to do something forensic. And I told Mr. Bruckheimer, you walk in a crime scene, there's a dead woman on the floor, there's a plant knocked over, there's a pink elephant in the backyard. Why? And you forensically put it together, and that's how the whole show really started.
Anthony Syker pitched this idea to us, and he rode around with forensics people for, God, almost a year. He concocted this series and created the characters based on people he met while he was doing this, and a lot of the crimes are actual crimes that happened.
Los actores William Peterson y Mark Helgenberger serían los investigadores principales. La producción del piloto empezó en abril del 2000. Syker y Bruckheimer debieron confiar en los consejos de criminalistas experimentados.
Then I go and help the actors actually do the testing, use the equipment correctly, hold things right, search correctly.
Las escenas de los crímenes fueron adaptadas para verse lo más reales posibles, con cuerpos y todo.
It's prosthetic makeup. I've never really gotten ever kind of grossed out by anything that's been, what's been shown on our show.
El mayor reto de los productores era convertir el complicado mundo forénsico en algo que los telespectadores quisieran ver.
Well, I think that CSI has actually taken Las Vegas and made Vegas sexy on a worldwide basis, and has made science sexy on a worldwide basis, and to be able to, everybody's been to Vegas, but when you see the Bruckheimer-esque way of showing Vegas visually becomes exciting.
CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, se estrenó en CBS en el 2000 y pronto era la número 2 de las mediciones de sintonía.
It's been a real wild ride, this show. It's meteoric rise in the pop cultural phenomenon that it is.
La televisora duplicó la serie mostrando CSI Miami con David Caruso y CSI New York con Gary Sinise. En el 2005, los 3 programas tenían más de 60 millones de teleaudientes cada semana. Para los expertos, la serie es entretenida, pero ¿qué tan real es?
I think if they actually had to televise a murder investigation, it would be boring as hell.
If it was horribly, horribly accurate, you would see hours and hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. That's kind of a brief description of law enforcement.
I mean, what we have to do and the time we spend and the frustration, there's no story there.
I watched about 15 minutes of CSI and I was like, man, we don't do all that shit.
In reality, it's a team effort. The coroner has a function, the CSI person has a function, detectives have a function, the crime lab has a function.
Even within the same state, real crime scene investigators have different duties. In Sacramento County, California, the Sheriff's Department CSIs are deputies who are specially trained to collect and photograph evidence. In Orange County, the Sheriff's Department uses civilian forensic specialists and scientists to collect, photograph, and also process the evidence at the crime lab.
Most agencies, while they're the same, they're all different. Some agencies have sworn personnel. Some agencies have civilian personnel. Smaller agencies don't have any CSI-trained personnel, and they rely on the bigger agencies or state entities to come in and process their major scenes.
Civiles o policiales, los investigadores de CSI tenían mucho en común entre ellos, pero no con los de la serie.
There is no such animal as the CSI people you see on TV.
We don't interview bad guys. In fact, sometimes we don't even know who they are.
People coming in what I would call club attire into a crime scene with high heels, I mean, that just doesn't happen.
We don't wear Armani suits. We don't drive Humvees.
I don't pull up in a sports car, and I can't get my DNA processed in about 3 hours.
Of course, on TV, you get to see the case, you get to see the evidence, you get to see the confession, you get to see a solution. I wish it was like that.
CSI is entertainment. And it's fun. The problem is, if you think what you see on CSI is what really happens in criminal investigation, then we have a major problem on our hands, because it couldn't be farther from the truth.
Seguimos a una verdadera unidad CSI en la investigación de un robo bancario, un suicidio y un tiroteo.
Everything is coming together that there was one gunshot fired.
Luego visitaremos un lugar digno de una película de terror, cuando nuestro programa continúe.
Every time I visit the body farm, I am horrified all over again.
El verdadero CSI. El verdadero CSI.
Once you get inside this world, you realize not only what a challenging and demanding job it is. I think the fantasy version of this, and I think what works about the big show, Las Vegas, and I think we're getting to some of that, is that in your worst hour, you would want those people to represent you, you know?
Welcome back to THS Investigates, the real-life CSI. From Las Vegas to Miami to New York City, CSI Hollywood-style turns murder into stylish entertainment. And each week, millions of fans go along for the ride. But we're going to take you on a very different ride, and there's nothing glamorous about it.
In the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department, I kind of have a unique role. I'm a deputy sheriff, first and foremost. So I have powers of arrest. But the sole duty of my job as a CSI officer is to provide crime scene investigations work. evidence collection, fingerprint collection, photography, videotape.
Regular patrol gets to go in when all the stuff is still going on. People running, screaming, bodies, maybe bullets still flying. CSI generally doesn't get there until after the smoke clears.
Here in Sacramento, we have 16 officers and we're assigned 12-hour shifts. So there's always a crime scene investigator in the field working.
We do burglaries, robberies, rapes, homicides.
We're headed right now down to the city of Elk Grove, and they have a bank down there which was robbed by 3 individuals. So we're going to go down and see what we can find as far as evidence left behind by the suspects there at the scene that we can collect and that we can gather some evidence from. When I got to that bank, I make contact with what we call the primary officer, and this is the officer that's in charge of the scene. They will give me kind of a guided walkthrough of what the suspects' actions were in the bank. In our bank scenario, we had 3 suspects come in that were wearing masks, that were armed with handguns. They climbed on top of the counters. So I had footprints on the countertops. By using my fingerprint dust, I was able to develop the actual shoe print patterns on the countertops, and then I was able to lift those later. So maybe at some point down the road, if we do find these suspects, we can compare the shoe prints that I was able to recover at the bank to any shoes that they may have in their house. The call we're headed to is a gentleman for some reason. He's decided to commit suicide. He lives in a mobile home park, and he's gone outside and locked himself in a tool shed. And while he was in there, apparently he took a high-powered rifle and shot himself and ultimately killed himself as a result of the injury. Typically, most suicides that we run across are pretty clear-cut, with few exceptions. Some of the things you want to determine to make sure that it is a legitimate suicide is, was there anybody else home at the time that maybe was a witness to it? Did the person leave any notes behind? The gentleman took himself outside into a work shed, and he barricaded himself inside there. The door is locked, and he's fallen against the door. There's no other way to get out of that room. So in that scenario, it's very easy to say that that is a suicide scene.
Aún para un veterano como el oficial Lopes, enfrentar la tragedia es un reto.
Sometimes you get a transfer of emotion, especially when you're dealing with loved ones. You oftentimes put yourself in their position. Anytime you see somebody devastated by a loss of a family member, it can be really hard. We got a report of a shooting. Subject, a male has been shot. It's possibly been shot in the head. And officers are just arriving on scene. There's a report that he is still breathing, but this could very easily turn into a homicide investigation. The first thing I did is to walk up to look at my victim to see, is this wound anything that I can photograph quickly? I want to get these injuries prior to medical treatment. I want to be able to detail them. Anything they're going to do is going to alter my initial view of that victim's injuries. Right now our victim has sustained definitely a single gunshot wound to the head. He has a point of entry and an exit wound, it appears, on the top of his head, but at this point he's still alive. He's talking, he's breathing. The bullet appears to have passed underneath his scalp and not actually penetrated into the skull, and this is why he is actually alive. So at the scene, we began searching the area looking for a shell casing. But part of the problem we have now is there's so much traffic going in there, foot traffic, that potentially that shell casing could be crushed down into the lawn. So we'll have to utilize a metal detector to attempt to find this casing. We were never able to recover one. We did recover the victim's shirt, which has gunpowder burn. We took his pants, and we collected 2 lollipops that were there at the scene. I'd like lollipop up on the sidewalk, just for now, and then the one that's back out here in the street. Bags are placed into evidence lockers here at our building. These lockers, once we shut the door, the lockers lock tight. I cannot get back into them. The only people that have keys are our property warehouse personnel. They collect the evidence from these lockers and they take it to our property warehouse.
This area behind me is our booking area. This is where all the property is. We gather it up from the different station houses in different areas. It's waiting to be booked and processed and put into the computer. The officers that work here process the property, and then we store it back in the warehouse proper. If there's a blood splatter or something like that that needs to be preserved, then usually that will go into the freezer. And we have 2 large freezers in the back that we have just packed full of evidence.
El verdadero CSI.
When I first came to the show, if there was one thing that I was a little unsure about, it was the fact that we were going to be dealing with death every week. I think I questioned whether I would be okay with that every week.
Welcome back to THS Investigates, the real-life CSI. One thing all murder investigations have in common is a victim. Tracking down the bad guy and solving the crime is a team effort.
I take the initial photographs of it, but I don't deal with the body. That's all done and handled by the coroner's office. And under state law, they're the ones that can only touch or alter or handle a body.
El forense responde sobre el lugar, motivos e identidad del occiso.
Our function is to determine the circumstances, manner of death.
First, they're looking to establish the identity of the individual. They're also looking for the time of death, the date and time of death. They'll look at the scene and all the things that are around the body. They're making an assessment whether or not there needs to be an autopsy.
Essentially, a coroner's investigator becomes an advocate for the deceased.
In most cases, when somebody's died suddenly, unexpectedly, like a traffic accident, the deputy coroner will determine who the next of kin is and then attempt to go out to their house and make that notification in person.
It's very difficult to deal with the families and to tell them that their loved one has died or been killed.
There's nothing you can do past that point to help somebody with their loss, with their grieving. That's the hardest part for me.
I have had one day where I had 2 children, separate motor vehicle accidents, one age 13 and one age 16. And I had to notify both mothers on the same day. And after that day, it was difficult to come to work the next day.
As tough as that was for Deputy Coroner David Brown, it's hard to even imagine how Jackie Burnt felt when tragedy struck right in her own home.
I thought that I was impervious and that death could not come near me or touch anybody in my family. And my daughter, who was 21, died 4 days after her 21st birthday in a car accident. She was hit by somebody that ran a red light. And I had a knock on the door in the middle of the night from the police agency that was handling in the city where she died, and they gave me the information. So I had to go to the hospital, and she died there. But it changed the way that I viewed what we do here. And I think I was always compassionate. But at that point, I began to understand in a way that I could never understand without that experience.
If I were to compare it to what I've seen on CSI, and I think the person who dies on these shows, that person is lost in the whole whodunit theme. At least here in this office, we try to maintain the dignity.
The ultimate goal here is to provide the families that we serve the answers for them about why the person they love died. And sometimes it's black and white, it's very, very clear. Other times it's not.
Uncovering the cause of death happens in the morgue. On TV, it's a place that looks almost gothic. The reality is very different.
We're going to take a tour of our morgue here. If you could respect these Bellevue-type arches, which is very cool.
Always dark. That I never understood. It's like they're in some, dark room trying to evaluate why somebody died, when this is a very visual art and science, and what we see really is very important.
Over here, of course, are our lockers where we keep the dead bodies. And see, it's television. Nothing there.
Through these doors is our refrigerator where we house our decedents between autopsy and the time that the mortuaries come to pick them up. We can house about 200 comfortably. We print every decedent that comes in. We use it for identification, positive identification. A lot of the times we'll use it on a John Doe that comes in, and then he would be wheeled in the refrigerator, and he'd wait until tomorrow for autopsy.
That will lead to the internal examination, which is the dissection that most people associate with the autopsy itself. And that's careful dissection of every organ and complete examination of the body cavities.
So this is a typical autopsy table. The decedent's head would be elevated on the head block, and the body lies here, and as the autopsy is done, the fluids from the autopsy will go down the trough in the table and run down the sink. This is the special autopsy room where we do homicide or suspicious deaths, criminal deaths in here. We have a separate room set aside so we eliminate DNA contamination in this room. The criminalist and the doctor, the forensic assistant, and the ID personnel who's photographing the autopsy will all come together in this room on this side of the window to do the autopsy, and the homicide investigators will be on the other side in this room over here. It's extremely important for a homicide detective to witness an autopsy and to be present and to have that immediate exchange with the doctor.
Usually how we're interacting with CSI officers is that we'll find something, it's usually some form of trace evidence on a body at the autopsy, and we'll need to have that collected and preserved.
I think if I had to clear up any misperceptions that people have in the general public, is that the autopsy itself isn't the ultimate diagnostic tool, so to speak. We rely heavily on the investigation, the deputy coroner's input, as well as the homicide detective's input.
Sometimes the corpse has been at the crime scene for a while and has started to decompose. That makes piecing together what happened even harder, but not impossible. On 3 remote acres of land in rural Tennessee, law enforcement officers and trainees learn how to decipher the secrets of human decay.
When you go behind that fence, you really think that you're either in a very scary, bad movie or that you have happened upon a battlefield, because you'll see pieces and parts and bodies all over the place.
Officially, it's the University of Tennessee Forensic Anthropology Facility, but most people call it the Body Farm, including best-selling author Patricia Cornwell, who featured this surreal place in one of her novels.
It is a very unusual decay research facility where basically people donate their bodies to science, but instead of them going to medical schools for anatomical dissection, these people have opted to allow themselves to be part of a forensic research experiment where they decay.
La granja de cadáveres fue una creación del antropólogo forense Dr. William Bass, quien vio la necesidad de investigaciones especiales en la ciencia de la descomposición humana.
In the fall of 1971, I went to the dean of the college and I said, "Dean, I need some land to put dead bodies on so I can find out what's happening." And that was the beginning of the Body Farm. The purpose was a need-to-know basis in what happens as a body decays. Can we tell the length of time that that individual has been dead? And the answer to that is yes.
Every time I visit the Body Farm, I am horrified all over again. You pull up into the parking lot, and already these people make their presence known. It's not the noise they make, it's the smell that drifts over the fence, and on moist, humid days with the winds in the wrong direction, it's like, oh God, do I really have to walk in there? The insects are bigger and louder. It's almost like everything's turned up many decibels.
Podrán ser grandes y ruidosos, pero los insectos son especiales.
One of the better ways of determining the length of time since death in the first week to 10 days after death is to look at the insects, mainly at this stage, the maggots. The first of the flies to be attracted to a decaying body are the blowflies. These are the green and blue iridescent flies. They will arrive almost immediately after death, and they will lay their eggs in the moist orifice of the body. I mean, we can tell what an individual, if they were taking cocaine or something like that, we can tell by doing what we call a maggot cocktail, where you grind the maggots up and look at the thing.
Entonces, ¿cómo ayuda la ciencia de la descomposición a la policía?
We do a lot of training here. FBI, we have a National Forensic Academy class funded by the Department of Justice that has 3 classes a year that we bring out here. Each of those groups spend at least a week out here learning how to locate bodies, how to recover scattered remains, how to excavate a grave, what to look for.
It's not a job for the faint of heart, yet the Body Farm provides answers to some of forensics' most fundamental questions. When THSI returns, science fiction versus science fact.
They always get prints off like rocks and dirt and leaves, and there are just items that you cannot get prints off sometimes.
El verdadero CSI.
The reality of our situation on CSI Miami is the lab that we have is so state-of-the-art that it's better than the real crime labs in this country.
Welcome back to THS Investigates, the real-life CSI. On TV, evidence is processed, the perp is identified, and an arrest is made in less than an hour. And the CSI unit does it all. But as we saw earlier, solving crimes is a team effort, and getting the facts takes time, patience, and an obsession with detail, especially in the lab.
There's no comparison. No comparison in the sense that the kind of fictionalized television crime laboratory is nothing like a real crime laboratory.
The CSI program, the TV show, really pushes technology to the limit.
I've heard you can use one instrument on TV and it does the DNA, and then they'll do the drugs, and they'll do something else, and that's not reality.
I think they do a terrific job of demonstrating the types of technology that's available in forensic science and the kinds of tools that we can use, but they're sometimes used in manners that are really just not real. And not that that's wrong, I mean, it's entertainment.
And TV viewers keep coming back for more. But forensic truth is nothing like TV fantasy.
They always get prints off like rocks and dirt and leaves, and there are just items that you cannot get prints off sometimes.
As we know, the staple of our show is using superglue fumes to fume and print items. And this would be a fume chamber. We would put also jeans or a gun or anything that we could superglue fume and bring out the prints, and it would be used in this chamber.
Ahora veamos cómo los expertos forenses encuentran huellas escondidas.
All right, what we're going to demonstrate here is a method known as supergluing, or cyanoacrylate ester is the scientific term. The technique is used for non-porous items. So the first thing we do is we add a little bit of hot water to rehydrate the prints. What the superglue is adhering to are the oils and moistures left behind by fingerprint residue. And we've heated up this metal plate, and we're going to put the glue on there. It will start to fume, and the glue fumes will adhere to the moisture in the fingerprint residue.
Las huellas dactilares ayudan a resolver cientos de casos cada año en el condado de Sacramento. La técnico en identificación Michelle Schreiner demuestra otra técnica.
Another way we can get fingerprints is to use something that we call rhodamin. And rhodamin simply is a dye stain, and it can be applied once an item of evidence has been superglued. Now I'm going to rinse it with the rhodamin, which is the pink dye stain. And then what we do is we rinse off the rhodamin with methanol. And we let this dry. And once the items are dry, then we'll examine them with the alternate light source to see if we have anything that will fluoresce. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to examine these items for latent prints with our forensic light source. First, what I need to do is put on my goggles. These are for eye protection, as well as it serves as an orange filter so that any latents would fluoresce. And then I'm going to turn the lights off. I'm going to go ahead and apply the light to the items. And here we go. Right here is a print that's fluorescing. And the rhodamin, which stained the super glue, is what is actually making this print appear.
In 2002, there were nearly 12,000 gun-related homicides in the U.S., but killers rarely leave weapons behind. What they do leave behind are bullets in their victims or shell casings at the scene. How criminalists figure out what kinds of firearms were used is a science in itself.
When a firearm comes into the laboratory for comparison to bullets or cartridge cases left at a scene, we test fire it here in our range. We then compare those test-fired bullets or cartridge cases to the evidence from the scene using the comparison microscope. Another type of examination that we do in this unit is called distance determination, where we try to determine the distance of the muzzle of the firearm to the target. In this particular case, the target was a jacket being worn by the victim. There is a bullet hole located in the lapel, and there is a gunshot residue pattern around the hole. With the firearm used in this case, I can produce test patterns in materials similar to the jacket at known distances.
Evidence can be microscopic, like gunshot residue, or the size of a car.
En el área de revisión de vehículos del condado Orange, el forense Joseph Chin se prepara a examinar un auto involucrado en una persecución a alta velocidad. Se alega que el conductor golpeó y agredió sexualmente a su esposa en el auto.
What we are doing here is that we are documenting the contents of the vehicle, inventorying everything, and we are examining the vehicle for any type of biological fluid such as blood or semen. The areas that have been circled in the back seat is apparent semen stains that we have identified. From here, since the female was a passenger and she was beaten in this area here, we mainly focused on areas where blood might have transferred from the beating. You'll notice we have a seatbelt here, which just appears to be seatbelt, standard seatbelt, not lashed. But as you pull it out, you'll notice that we do have some blood that we will be collecting and sampling, and that would be then submitted further on for testing.
So right now we're in the CSI exam area of our laboratory. This is where we bring in all of our items of evidence that need to either have stuff taken from them to go to our trace evidence section or our DNA section. We have lots of big tables here to spread things out on and look at them. We have magnifiers so we can look for small things. We have stereo microscopes to look for even smaller things. You'll notice one thing is that we have lots of lights on. That's one thing in the CSI show. They turn all the lighting down for this dramatic effect, which would be exactly the last thing that you would want to do if you were looking for evidence.
But TV usually gets it right when scenes call for cutting-edge technology.
Can you spell gas chromatograph mass spectrometer? I'll show you one in here. This is our trace analysis room for CSI New York. It's where we take all the trace evidence, any kind of drugs or any sort of trace evidence, hair, fibers, blood, and put it into machines that actually deconstruct every atom to let you know exactly what it is.
Gas chromatography mass spectrometers is kind of a mouthful. GCMSs for short, are definitely on the set of CSI, and they're used for a lot of different things on that show, but the types of samples that we look for are on these instruments. We have the capability of looking for over 900 different compounds, different classes of drugs, both legal and illegal, as well as different toxins and poisons.
Cuando se trata de atrapar criminales, la prueba de ADN sigue siendo imbatible. El ADN llegó a la prensa en 1995 en el juicio a O.J. Simpson por el asesinato de su ex esposa Nicole Brown Simpson y su amigo Ron Goldman.
What the O.J. Simpson case did was it really brought in the public's eye what forensic science is and actually how important it is in being able to answer the questions that are in a case and being able to prove or disprove a case.
En el caso de O.J., el ADN se retiró de la corte por una supuesta mala manipulación del mismo, pero este sigue siendo crucial al resolver asesinatos y crímenes sexuales. Hablamos con expertos que examinaron evidencias recogidas en el lugar de una violación en Sacramento.
In this case, I found 9 condom collection kits. Typically, I will swab the inside of it. I'm just seeing if there is any semen to go on for further DNA analysis.
When you take a swabbing from a victim, you always are going to get some of her skin cells from her body cavities along with the sperm that you're interested in. So what we try to do is to separate the sperm from her, and so that's called a differential. It actually takes a better part of a day to complete that process.
El ADN está en todos lados. Es la composición genética de todos los organismos vivos.
DNA isn't just, you don't just go and say, oh, there's some DNA right here. You have to be able to find it. It's in every cell in your body. And you have lots of different kinds of cells.
When we finally develop a DNA profile from a biological sample, say semen or sperm, and we have a single source profile, the random probability that someone else in the general population would have that exact same profile typically is around 1 in, say, 100 quadrillion.
El verdadero CSI.
I think one of the things I've learned about that profession is the mental toughness that goes into it. I don't know how they do it.
Welcome back to THS Investigates, the real-life CSI. Crime scene investigators on the hit TV series almost never lose their cool. But investigating violent crimes takes an emotional toll, and professional detachment isn't always an option.
We have had officers request to be reassigned out of the unit after looking at so many dead people, or specifically so many dead children. I mean, we don't generally see people at the best time in their life. We're usually there at the worst time in their life. The family has found their loved one murdered. The family has just lost an infant and it does take a toll on my officers.
One of the toughest calls for any crime scene investigator is suicide, especially when the victim is young. The statistics are grim. Each year in the United States, nearly 2,000 teenagers take their own lives. Some don't even make it that far.
Child suicides, I've had several of those. The youngest suicide victim I had was a 12-year-old boy who didn't get good grades at school and was worried that his parents were going to come down on him hard and ground him. So he hung himself in his bedroom closet with his belt. I remember him to this day. I remember his parents in the, sorry, this is, I remember his parents in the trauma room at the hospital, seeing him afterwards. So that's saying goodbye to him. Most of us all have kids, and to see a kid make a choice like that at 12 years old, that he felt he had to throw his life away because he was not going to please his parents. How can that not affect you?
Es cierto, al final del día, muchos investigadores no quieren irse de su turno.
On the scene, you focus on, at least I do, focus on the job. Especially if it's a dead person, you know, justice has to be done. The hard part for me is always afterwards. I can put it away. I hang up my uniform and I hang up my job and that's it. And if worse comes to worse, I'm very lucky. I have a husband who is retired from law enforcement. And I can always wake his butt up and say, hey, I got to tell you about this.
Learning to cope with the stress is critical for all investigators and forensic experts. So is keeping it together where it counts the most, in court.
As you talk about something and you come to an end of a conclusion and you see the family members shaking their head and you know you've done your job. Or when you talk to the jury and you tell them and you get the same reaction out of a jury, you know you've painted the picture so that they understand what took place at that scene because they're truly there with you.
Pero el efecto CSI ha complicado mucho más el trabajo de jurados al sentenciar criminales.
You have a situation where people are just enamored with forensic science. So you have victims who, in a residential burglary, when for the most part, all we're really able to collect and deal with is fingerprint evidence, they're wanting their whole house gone through. They want DNA collected, they want hair and fiber searches, and I've seen it on TV, why aren't you doing it here? And so it's putting undue pressure on attorneys to prosecutors and prosecuting their cases, trying to explain why things weren't done in certain areas.
Quite often I get a district attorney that will ask me that question, can you compare your job of what you do as a CSI officer to the TV show, and how is it different? And typically my standard answer is, it probably is like comparing Star Wars to the space shuttle program. Do they both fly in space? Yeah, and that's about where it ends.
I see it every day that I'm out in the field dealing with victims because everybody watches the show. And even if I'm doing a very simple routine crime, they want to know if I'm going to look for DNA, if I'm bringing out the laser.
In fact, a lot of officers think sometimes that we can do things that we can't do. So they'll ask us, well, why don't you use this nifty neato tool on my burglary? And we'll say, you don't want us to use this nifty neato tool because it'll totally destroy your house.
In March 2005, the CSI effect played out on national TV.
We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Robert Blake, not guilty of the crime of first-degree murder of Bonnie Lee Bakley.
12 ordinary men and women acquitted actor Robert Blake in the shooting death of his wife. The jurors said that if Blake pulled the trigger, as the prosecutor alleged, cops would have found traces of gunshot residue, or GSR. They didn't.
They couldn't put the gun in his hand. Circumstantial evidence. There was no GSR. There was no blood on the clothing. There was nothing.
You're seeing jurors who wanted more information out of some of the items of evidence that they didn't get, and because they couldn't get it, in their minds, their reality is it can be done. I've seen it on TV. Why was it not demonstrated here?
El efecto CSI también se siente fuera de la corte.
can be incredibly helpful in terms of getting research funding, operational funds for laboratories, boosts in education, and just general prominence that brings you to the attention of people who make decisions.
En el 2001, Gil Grissom fue a Washington. La estrella de CSI, William Peterson, le pidió al Congreso incrementar los fondos para laboratorios de criminalística en todo el país.
I would say that we're ever grateful that he would have even taken the time to do that, to go and profess how important our profession is to the point that it's given forensic science now some resources. But yet you look at the reality of real experts, real people doing this day in, day out, and their weight didn't carry as much as, the star of CSI did.
Young people watch various kinds of television programs, and they may be attracted to a criminal justice career where they otherwise wouldn't have.
It's been an enormous boon to educational institutions. There's been a huge growth in forensic science educational programs and classes. I know at West Virginia University, we started in 2000 with 3 graduates. We're now the largest major on campus with over 500 students.
El efecto CSI ha sorprendido hasta las estrellas de televisión.
The thing that surprises me the most about this show and about my character is that when girls, 9, 10, 11-year-old girls come up to me and say, I want to become a criminalist because of your character.
Most forensic science labs are at least 50% female. My introduction to forensic science class is about 95% female.
Para quienes sueñen con convertirse en investigadores de una escena del crimen, los profesionales aconsejan.
If you're specifically interested in the forensics side of it, take some college classes that deal with this and see if you can actually view an autopsy. And not everybody's wired to do that.
Figure out what it is you're looking at the show that you really want to do. If you want to do forensics, you don't want to do my job. You don't want to do CSI. You want to go to a crime lab.
The bachelor's science degree in forensic and investigative sciences at West Virginia University is a science-heavy program. The first 2 years, students take biology, chemistry, physics, math, statistics. If they're committed to the program, they need to spend some time in public speaking courses and things like that. You need to be able to transfer your information to the jury to be at all effective as either a CSI or a forensic scientist.
From colleges and universities to squad rooms and crime labs and into the courthouse, the CSI effect has been profound. The jury's still out on where all this is headed, but one thing is certain, the art and science of crime fighting have changed forever. I'm Samantha Harris. Thanks for watching.
We're all adrenaline junkies. We all tend to like to do the pursuit. We like to catch the bad guy. We like to get that one fingerprint that nails the rapist.
There's nothing I can really do to prevent an act from happening, but maybe I can help prevent it from happening again to somebody else.
Average lifespan of law enforcement was 58 or 2 years after retirement. I'm going to be one of those people that surpasses this statistic. I've made up my mind I'm going to live to 100, but I don't know. I could catch a bullet tomorrow.